Welcome, everyone. It's great to see you all on this July 21st, 2022. Can you all believe it? We want to welcome you to the University of Phoenix Educational Equity Webinar Series. My name is Saray Lopez, Director in the Office of Educational Equity, and this monthly series is hosted by myself and my colleague, Tondra Richardson, who is also in the office, in this office. The Educational Equity Webinar Series was created with the hope to foster a learning environment where we can explore paths to empower individual action toward greater unity and impact change. University of Phoenix serves the working adult employed across all industries, and of these students, 56% of them identify from an underrepresented community. Therefore, it is our hope to facilitate thought-provoking conversations to prepare and encourage the practice of inclusive leadership in a culturally complex society. So today's webinar, why you're all here, we're going to be talking about building bridges among generational differences in the workplace, and we're definitely looking forward to our speaker, LaTasha Williams. Next slide, please. We want to invite you to take a moment to join us here, and we acknowledge that this event is being broadcasted globally. So may we honor and give gratitude to the Indigenous peoples who were the original custodians of the various lands on which we live and work. We recognize that a land acknowledgement alone is not sufficient, yet it serves as a starting point as we continue our individual journeys towards racial equity. Here in the Phoenix metropolitan area, we inhabit the Hohokam, Akimel-O'odham, Kipash, and Yavapai land. Thank you all for joining us and taking time to honor these original custodians of our lands. Next slide. So now let's take a moment to raise awareness of the cultural and heritage months and also important dates this year. These are key equity, diversity, and inclusion dates and milestones, and we do acknowledge that there may be some dates that we have missed, and we definitely invite you to share in the chat if there's an observance missing aligned within the month of July. Please include the details, perhaps a link, a book, article, anything so we can all learn about its significance. Next slide.
Thank you, Saray, and welcome everyone. Before we get into today's discussion, we want to let you know that we're going to continue this discussion next month with a part 2 of this webinar. So we invite you to join us on August 18th for part 2 of the discussion. During this part 2 session, we will invite a panel of individuals to share their unique experiences and the way in which they have worked to build bridges among generational differences in the workplace. You can scan the QR code here, or we will be sharing a link in the chat so that you can click and register there as well. So we hope to see you next month also. Next slide, please. All right. So now for a little housekeeping. We have a great topic before you today. So we're certain that everyone is going to maintain respectful and create a community around our speaker, both in your questions and in the chat. But just as a quick reminder, we want to make sure that we set a few guidelines. We value your participation and potentially uncomfortable discussions, as this reinforces our willingness to learn and grow. We encourage everyone to share your experiences and perspectives in the chat box. We also ask for you to participate to an atmosphere of mutual respect and sensitivity. In addition, we highly encourage you to connect with one another. Share your LinkedIn profile in the chat and helpful resources that you have that are related to today's topic. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them in the question box at the bottom of your Zoom screen. The questions will be answered at the end of the session as time permits. Can we move to the next slide, please? All right, now we would like to introduce our dynamic speaker for today, LaTasha Williams. LaTasha was voted one of the top women in grocery and the next generation leader to watch. She's a 3-time certified career coach, leadership coach, and resume writer for early to mid-career professionals. For 14 years, she hustled in her own line of work, climbing the corporate ladder and barreling through promotion after promotion as a young leader. And she has definitely found that secret to moving up the ladder. So since she has that secret, she knew she must have tapped into a career strategy that most don't think about. She then began a new mission of sharing what she'd learned along the way, eventually honing in on the secret sauce for career growth, regardless of your age. And that was to teach leaders how to act their generation, but harness the power of the next while learning how to uncover the power in the workplace. Now, with a background in corporate recruiting, training and development, and leadership development, her career successes have enabled her to teach ambitious professionals how to infuse strategy and impact into their careers and companies, to learn and to inspire their people. Wow. Can't wait to hear from LaTasha today. I hope you all are as excited as I am. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to LaTasha now. LaTasha?
Okay, thank you so much. That was such a good intro. We are strong here at exactly 100 people, I think, in the room. So thanks again for joining. Let us know where you're joining. I'm seeing Phoenix and all those other places. So thanks again for the introduction. So I am going to, I need to be able to share my screen here. Come on, give me access. Albuquerque, Dallas, look at that. All over. Okay, awesome, awesome, awesome. Well, like it was told, we are definitely all here today to talk about building bridges among generational differences in the workplace. And I know you may or may not have heard this topic in a variety of different ways, but hopefully I'll be able to put a different spin on it. And like was said earlier, really invoke some thought-provoking discussion, whether it's here and outside of here. Really, that's the joy of all these sort of conversations, that how you take it to your workplace, to your school, to your institution, to your organization, and all of those things in between. So I'll get into diving into my background and why I just love this topic so much. But I will just, start off with, here's what I want you to mainly take away from here, is that the overall lesson of all of this, we'll dive into generational things and what you need to look for. I really want you to look at it from a sense of changing your perspective and thinking about it more from a strategic lens from wherever you sit. And the overall, the silver lining, or in the end of the day, just pick a person in different generations and explore what I like to call their oneness, right? Learn and figure out what they bring to the workplace, to academia, to their classroom, and just figure all of that out and just have great conversations. So hopefully I'll help you change your perspective today. And what we're going to cover, I guess how I would like to call it, is more of maybe that starter discussion, because I know there's a series of some continued dialogue that'll be hosted here. So think of what I'm going to talk about. I'm trying to preface this, so spoiler alert, talk about history, the mysteries, I guess, the potential, and really the possibilities of what a multi-generational workforce does. So again, in a very strategic lens. So this is not about accepting or denying or any of those things about generational stereotypes, but what do we do with it? Because we know that for the first time in the workplace, all 5 generations are here working together and moving things forward. And we really saw the evidence of that during what we're dealing with now in the workplace and beyond. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. So hopefully that was a good intro. And I like to begin off with this quote that I really, really love. Organizations and all of us that take the time to break through stereotypes and myths, that's really what I want to focus on in a few here. We can create tremendous trust, teamwork, communication, openness, that unlocks the potential of every generation. Quality work is ageless. That's really what the core of it is here. There's different thoughts and opinions on generations and what they bring and what they can and cannot do, but quality work is ageless. So really that's what we need to help foster in the workplace and beyond. And if we think about it, in which I'll share in a little bit, is that now we're seeing that cool little fusion here of what was once maybe stereotype or generalized to certain generations are now spread across all of us, no matter what generation. Trust, teamwork, communication, and ability to bring our best selves to work is really what we're seeing that evolve to. So as leaders, this is why I want you to think about, or asking you to think about generations strategically in a different way, is for us to be able to do that. So I'm going to begin with the end in mind. And by the way, I know there's people in here that probably do presentations a lot in academia. I am going to break every PowerPoint rule possible, okay? Because I want to be able to send this to you and want to make sure there's enough information for you to have. So it's going to be a lot of words. So you'll see words on the screen, but I'm going to talk through them. But I want to give you enough to be able to take back and process and think after we finish chatting today. But I want to start off with here's what you came for, okay? Multi-generational workforce strategy. So to me, it's understanding generational, a snapshot, right? Snapshot of all the generations in the workplace and what that means to your strategy, not only now, but really thinking about it like a now, next, later plan. You know, it seems like it's so far away, but even I think about from a academic standpoint, the conversations we're talking about now for leaders that are about to start here in the fall are for the leaders of 2030, basically, by the time they get in the workforce. So taking that snapshot and understanding what that looks like is going to be very key. And then understanding how to leverage those different skill sets that are based on generations, which is really the context in which we think about work and the things around us. Taking that, developing employee training, recruitment strategies, retention strategies, and then repeat. So again, this is what you all came for. So I wanted to begin off with this. So my tips for you, and then I'm going to tell you why I got to these tips, and then I'll summarize with the same exact slide so you see it pull together, is, you know, no matter if you're a company or an academia or an employee or whatever it is, there's a role that we all play in a multi-generational workforce strategy. So some of my tips for you is review and assess your current company's generational data, trends. A lot of companies, we have this data readily available, or we can pull it in some capacity. So thinking strategically really starts with that, and understanding things like turnover and exit interview data. And have you ever broken that down by generationally, or seeing the trends and where that overlaps, what's called intergenerationally. So in between all of those. And then partnering in-house on workforce strategies and what that means for us, whether that's mentorship, but digging below the surface there. And even just asking, adopting a coaching-based or whole leadership style. That's definitely my tips. And then keeping the conversations going. And then right there at the bottom, what academia can do is partnering with companies on coursework and understanding realistic job previews so you can help ready those future leaders in partnership with the workplace. So that's what I want you to leave with. So let me go through what you're going to get over these next 45 minutes-ish here. So before the training, and then we have after the training, this is how I want you to feel. This is how you know you've accomplished something, at least to me. You feel these things, you feel differently about the topic at hand. So before, as you sit now, maybe you've joined for one of these reasons. You want to uncover generational stats and the importance of it for both academia and employers. That's you. Let me know in the chat. Let me know in the chat if any of these fall for where the scope that you're looking at this in. And then you have a role in developing or advising leaders of the future, leaders of the now, and everything in between. And or you want to learn how to shift your perspective on what a generation is and isn't for the future of work. And I see the thumbs up. Thank you for that. Hey, I'm a millennial. I love those emojis. So feel free to drop those whenever you see fit. Okay. So before training, after though, our mini session here today, I want you to be able to think strategically, think about some of the stuff that I just shared with you on that last slide and use it to guide yourself, influence your thinking, and influence those around you to think about the multi-generational workforce in a different way. And then also use those tips to adapt your approach, thinking strategically, helping even your leaders think through a now, next, later plan and how we need to prepare in different ways. And then use this knowledge to train, right? That's the level of mastery. That's how we know we got to that point. We can teach other people these concepts. So share away. So you're in the right place if that's where you fall. But thanks for the intro earlier. So a little bit about me here on the screen, LaTasha Williams. I like to think of myself pretty generationally obsessed because once I got in the workplace as a millennial and started to climb and get higher and higher level roles, really started to hone in on the fact of, well, I may always be the youngest in the room, or do I remove that only and really harness my impact and my value within the context of my generation? That's what I'm looking at things, and I can't change that, but here's what I can bring. So once I started to think about that, it literally shifted everything. In fact, my company name Modern Millennial came from, in the workplace, I made an ebook about how to think like a millennial, but act like your generation, and was sharing it because I felt like we all had things to learn from each other in the workplace. And those things that seem like they're different really is what brings us together. There's a lot of great collaboration across generations. So from coffee cup to coffee cup is basically me starting off as a server and then having that coffee cup in a corporate office. So that's kind of been my journey, and kind of blazing that path through as a millennial leader versus running from generations. I want them to think I'm young. I am young. So what do I bring? Or the reverse of that, depending on where you fall. So that's really what made me start to dive into generations, because I said there's a strategy to this somewhere in here. The answers to workforce, whether it's training or recruitments or development or any of those things, there's power in it, which means there must be a business impact. That's what I want you to take away from here. What's the business impact? We have, a lot of these conversations around generations and what does that mean? And people agree or don't agree. There's also filters that go into that, how you were raised and things like that. But really underneath it all is the strategy, the answers for us to really navigate our workplaces differently. So I've honed in on that, and today, hopefully some of that comes off in this presentation. But what you are going to learn today, or at least take away from me, and in fact, success, if you are leaving 1% more better and more knowledgeable with what I'm going to share with you than what you came in with, that is success, right? Because you do that every day, for 300% better every year. But my main topics today are going to be why you need to myth bust your own generational talk. Usually, when we think about generations, we think about stereotypes, and I want us to shift that to strategy a little bit more. So shifting your perspective is going to be key here. And then 5 tips for building bridges and ways to stop burning them. That's why you came here. And then I want to talk about some 8 mega trends that, at least for me, in my opinion, that I'm seeing that's shaping the future of work, and as that relates to generations, and then talk a little bit about strategy. So wish me luck. That's what I'm going to cover today. We're going to get to it, okay? But first, though, I think it's important to understand, as we know, generations are changing rather. There's different opportunities. That's really what that opens the door to, different challenges too, and all of those things. So in order to stay ahead of the curve, you have to understand what role that you play in this multi-generational workforce curve, if you will, or this bridge rather, because we know success looks different based on the perspective that you have. So I've always outlined that there's 4 different steps in the bridge, or different pieces of the bridge, if you will. So from the role of academia, you think about the bridge to support bridging the gap of generations in the workplace, the role that academia plays, the role that the employer plays, the role that the employee plays, and if you are a leader of others, and also where those overlap and overlap with each other. So academia, really how you support the bridge or bridge the gap is helping to set the foundations of leadership. That's where you get the technical training I have for future and reimagined leaders, those that continue to evolve, and those that end up going back to school for more continued education, and those that are in that traditional next generation leader. And then also to continue to partner with organizations, but in a different way. As the workplace shifts, what is the strategy from an academic standpoint, whether you're a professor or in the offices, wherever you fit? How do you understand what that looks like? I mean, even think about it, just I don't know if you look at job titles lately, but they're all different. They're all different. Probably hard to keep up when you're trying to tell your students what's out there. But that's what I mean about realistic job previews, enhanced learning experiences. You may be doing some of this, but definitely more broadly. That's the part of the bridge that you have in bridging that gap, or helping us to do so. Hopefully that makes sense. And then from the employer standpoint is the upskill, the development, and acceleration of a multi-generational workforce. So we got to take what you have set the foundation for and let that unleash and provide strategies in order to help our employees do so. So crafting learning experiences, targeted opportunities. We went on a journey of talking about diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging and things like that, but often little talk about generational perspectives and what that actually means. So we're almost scratching the surface, if you will. And as the employee is to leverage all of that knowledge from academia and your employer and be able to put that into action in whether you are a leader of others or individual contributor. How do you leverage this in a multi-generational workforce as a competitive advantage? We are all competitive advantages for companies and organizations in which we serve and support. And then lastly, leader of others. So similar language, but upskill, develop, foster environments, but I have trust and strive to achieve an overall balance. So you're taking all of that academia with the employer, the employee, and as a leader of others, pulling that together, which can be a lot at times, right? So that's why if we understand where we fall on the bridge of bridging the gap, we can work closer and closer together. Makes me think about even as an employer, it's not just going on campus or the career fairs, it's really diving in deep, using this maybe more as a model of what does ROI look like? What does deeper partnerships look like with academia because they're helping to set the tone, whether it's directly or indirectly. So that's my bridge there. And I think it's important to understand the context is what I'm going to cover over the next couple of slides, and then talk about the contents, what you do with that. So that's what I mean by that strategy when I said that. And once you understand this, it really makes this conversation a very powerful tool in the workplace to understand all of that. So that's my bridge there. And, just to continue that, I said, spoiler alert, academia can really help organizations with this. I feel like now is the time where you get to help companies merge that theory and then the real life work applications. And what does that mean together to move the company forward or move employees forward? Because what we know or what we've seen is that almost narrowing down of any stereotypes. It's all generations. They want career developments. They want that in some sort of way. So in order to do that, you must understand the history of the workplace. So we're going to go into generations in a little bit, but understanding that is really the foundation of a really great multi-generational workplace and our role in that. So that's my little quote here with a spoiler alert. But going into the lesson, I won't stick too much time here. I think everyone might have at least a little bit idea of what generations mean and what that means. You probably sits in one of these, but this is usually where we start. And then I'm going to kind of take the curtain off, reveal some things a little bit and dive a little bit deeper than what this is. But we start off, we know this, we say 5 generations in the workplace. We've heard of that in some sort of capacity. And percentages of what that means. And usually we break that down. We understand values and concerns, but definitely if you haven't thought about this or had this conversation in your workplace at a much broader level, this is the start. So then knowing this, what does that look like in your organization? Break down your stats, get a snapshot of what that looks like in your workplace, those that we're hiring, those that are terming, those that are staying. Take a generational snapshot and talk about the importance of this. But really, what I like the conversation of generations is more so, and sometimes this is where it gets lost a little bit based on your thoughts of generations. To me, it's not really to put in a box, but it can happen if you're not careful. It's really about understanding the generational shaping moments. So really, that's where generations came from. As I started really diving more into this. So fun fact a little bit here about generations, if you know this, but the context of just the thought of a generation really started in about the 1500s. It was by 2 American authors, Strauss and Howe, and they talked about that. Really, the point of generations was to identify those and more so strategies by age cohorts. So really by 3 criteria: the age, location in history, their beliefs and their behaviors, and their perceived memberships. Are they aware that they're part of this generation? And actually the only one, or at least up until maybe a few years ago, that was really noted by government institutions was baby boomers. They're only ones that were in census. All the other ones were kind of created socially, if you will, which makes the importance of the shaping moments very, very key as you think about bridging the gaps and creating workforce strategies around generations in the workplace. So that was really cool for me once I started diving into it. And millennial generation were the first to kind of collapse the international divides, because these shaping moments only mean things to those that are in the United States, maybe not those that are across the board. So understanding the shaping moments will be key, because you understand the context in which you need to talk to leaders that maybe fall in these different generations. But we know they're working side by side. So this is really the key and a part of your conversation and your strategy around a multi-generational workplace. So first we have the snapshot overall, then we go to the shaping moments, which I think is the really important piece here. Even the shift, as you see, from traditionalists, so from more of, think about from like even the labor ages, right? So from agricultural to baby boomers to Gen X, the rise of internet. So they understand both. Great leaders to tap into, to work on projects and change innovation and those sort of things, because they've seen it. Millennials who are, confident, and that was the biggest generation that started to be more diverse and global. And then you got Gen Z here that we're trying to figure out they're inside of all things technical. So shaping moments are very key for you to understand and break this down in your organization. So my question, and I don't even know if I can see the chat here, so I will come there, but you can put in the chat, what percentage of the workforce do you think will be each generation, let's say millennials and Gen Z, for sake of conversation, by 2025 and 2030, which is coming up very, very, very fast here. So let me see, I can see the chat. What percentage? What percentage do you think? 20, 30, 40, you probably put a variety of different numbers. So let's dive into that as you kind of put your answers there in chat. So I like to think about the road to 2030. I like to think about it in a 10-year time span, even think about technological changes, usually about 10-year time span, in which you'll have to start the conversation of reskilling, upskilling leaders. But if you haven't dived into this, it's estimated that Gen Z will make up about 30% of the workplace. They'll be in leadership roles at that point by 2030. Some of them are starting to get into roles, whether it's internships and getting some of those decision-making positions, which is why the partnership with academia is very key. They're starting to get in there for us. And then also millennials and Gen Z total. Now I've seen some variety in this stat here, but total is usually looks like it's about 70%, not only millennials. So I know there's different reporting and things like that out there, but total, that's what that looks like. But the other generation's still in the workplace, and I'm going to share a visual about that in just a little bit. But knowing all this and things that we know about, generations, and again, it's more about this moments that shape the generations. You may flex in between some of those generations, or you may have influences from others. So that's usually why people feel like they fit or may not fit. But overall, it helps us with strategy. But 89% of talent professionals agree that a multi-generational workforce makes their company successful. I mean, in fact, if I maybe made a poll here today, maybe I think most all of you would agree with that. However, less than about 10% have training or anything directly related to multi-generational workforce, according to Forbes and a few other studies, which is very interesting, which lets me know you all in this room get some value out of this today, and you go ahead and share. You will be in the cusp of studying history in your company. That's how big of a deal that this is, because we're all trying to figure out what that means. And then it also means, for us to understand the varying degrees of skills. And that's why I like those shaping moments, right? That's the difference between those that can adapt to tech quickly because they were tech informed like millennials, or tech infused like a Gen Z, which means that's the way of life. So it's not a big deal anymore. That's where you see that difference. So when you understand those things, you can be strategic in how you navigate the workplace, navigate academia. How can academia support and help? Those sort of things are very important. But I love even a stat from an attorney at AARP about the vast majority of employers who offer any sort of diversity and inclusion training do not include age. So we have a really unique opportunity on our road to 2030, which we should be thinking about now. Like I said earlier, more of a now, next, later sort of plan there. So keep that in mind as you kind of take this away. What does that mean? Like the strategies we think about today the leaders that are of 2030, 2025 and beyond that may need to vary. So are the strategies for our workforce adaptable and agile in nature? That's going to be a key conversation for you to have. So I told you I'd give you some visuals. So next couple slides, some visuals here so you can see that. So the future of generational talk to me is moving or shifting the perspective of the conversation from age to stage that people are in, age to stage, because that changes, right? As you think about younger generation, there may be stereotypes around that or whatever you heard, but the stage of life they're in also impacts that. And the stage that they're in their career also shifts and adjusts that. My thoughts at the beginning of my career are different now after a decade in, but the things that shaped my brain and moving forwards are pretty consistent generationally. But again, that's very high level, right? So millennials will comprise the majority of the workforce by 2025. But that's just evolution. At some point, that number for baby boomers was very high. For Gen X, that was very high. So this is a normal occurrence. This should be happening. So sometimes we kind of put it in the box because there's a lot of attention on the millennials, but there's always a shift at some point. So how is your company adapting to that shift? Have you looked into your company to see where does your generationally, where do your employees fall? Where are you losing them? And then start to make strategies around that and a little bit more specific. But this starts off at 2015, going all the way to 2040. So just a visual for you to be able to use. And then as we continue the conversation, I just found another one. It's really about global labor force participation, which is where you see some of these stats. But we're seeing things now like people are working longer, or if you heard of this term, but the boomerangs that are maybe retiring and then wanting to come back in a different capacity. If that's a big chunk of your workforce, do you have a strategy around doing that? Maybe have you partnered with academia for any continued development for leaders that fall under that range? They have that historical knowledge and they want to come back to work and still provide value. Again, as we think about our workforce strategies, if we use this as a baseline, this can help form some of the focus areas that we need to have. So here is a little chart of the global labor workforce participation, again, from 2020 to 2030. So if you like the other one or you like this one, I want to give you some differences to take a look at. But what we're seeing, which is why I said the shift between the generation age to the stage that they're in life and that we're in as a society because of what we're going through right now. In 2020, Deloitte pulled this insight, which I thought was really cool, and started to even share out more stats and reportings and things like that, that the shrinking gap in generational differences is starting to happen right now. What COVID has revealed is that we all want trust. Like I said, we all want ways to advance. We all want those things. It's just that generationally, we may go about those things differently. Do I want life-work balance or work-life balance? But either way, all generations want balance in some way. What does that look like? So if you have things like insight surveys or yearly employee surveys or things like that, that would be a good area to take a look at that and kind of cross-reference that to why you lose people. But I thought this was really cool, talking about the shrinking gap in the differences, and today is in the green, and the gray is what it looks like in 3 years. And as I continue, it's going to shrink more, which means the differences in the views of work-life balance and work-life flexibility important to all. The views of the expectation of loyalty or job security, when that was maybe a stereotype to something like a baby boomer or Gen X might want, everyone wants that. In fact, Gen Z is actually revealing in a lot of research starting to be more like baby boomers. You see that overlap of maybe grandparents and the grandchildren, that sort of thing. Even as I start diving into this, you always see, or usually, like there's a space in between. So you got baby boomers that tie well to Gen Z, you got Gen X that tie well to millennials, and all those cool, unique things, which again, that's the importance of really fostering a multi-generational workforce, is that we can have these sort of great things happen in the workplace. And all the answers really that we need is right there if we would have focus groups and things like that for leaders that fall across all generations. To do a lot of marketing, what about the other areas of the business? And then the expectations of advancements, you see that shrinking, which means the expectation is that I do advance no matter what generation I'm in. Now that advancement may be lateral. That advancement may mean I feel like I should be CEO after I graduate, whatever that is, but the notion of advancement is key. So there's just a few graphs that I like to refer to as we talk about the future of generational talk and what that looks like. So up until now, we've more of set the foundation. So let me know an emoji. Are you picking up what I'm putting down? Are you with me so far? Seeing some things in chat. Okay, awesome. Thought-provoking, right? That was the point of today, not answering the questions, but the thought-provoking. I love this. Ooh, and we threw a little celebration in there. I love that, whoever did that for me. Okay, so now let's remix all of this, right? Ooh, I see the emoji with the open mouth. I don't know if that's good or bad. We're gonna take that anyway. But the remix, right? So once we understand, I hope you're laughing with me, not at me, right? I think you're laughing with me. Okay, so now we understand the context, right? Generationally, what does that mean? We get rid of the stereotypes, but we look at the shaping moments and we take that and, you know, we look at what that means in our workplace, because that's really what that should help shape. And then your strategies can help shape that. Do you have a workplace that's, you know, heavily Gen X, baby boomers, but you're heavily focused on high school? I don't know. Like, this is how we start to be more strategic in that way. I don't have that exact answer because that's going to depend on your workplace, unless the goal is strategically you want to bring in younger leaders so you can connect them and have a really robust mentorship. That's where the joy of multi-generational comes from. But the longer, though, that I study this and stay obsessed with this because it's amazing, the more similarities, you know, you start to see of what those, even before, like I said, what we're talking about now, you still saw similarities in it. It's just that we might have got so tied to the stereotypes that we didn't see. Balance is balance, flexibility is flexibility. You just need to understand. And that's when I said earlier, talk to the people that oneness and what that means. But some of those fundamentals that are similar across all is meaning, purpose. Everyone wants a great leader. I might want a great leader so they can leave me alone, but I still want a great leader. Professional growth. Those things don't change usually that much if you dive into it. Just the way that we look at that changes. And that's the important thing to take away from here. So that leads me to kind of go into my conversation around intergenerational. So this is where we start to myth bust some things. So hopefully you're ready to myth bust. You're a myth buster today, okay? Because that's really what we should evolve to, or my opinion of what we should evolve to. So here's why though. Like I was just sharing a few, even before COVID-19, but for human resources, for HR, this has been a topic. The multi-generational workforce has been a topic for a while. It didn't just spring up on us. It's just that now that we're putting the emphasis on diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, underneath that iceberg of that are a variety of different things, abilities, age, et cetera, et cetera. So which means the demographic profile of the workforce is changing. We can probably think Gen Z. And at some point, I would have said too, we can probably think millennials. And then at some point, we can think Gen X. I mean, with every changing generation, there's a shift in what they want from the workplace. So that's why the stereotypes should not get in our way so much, because this is a normal shift. It should shift and change. The profile of the workforce, the profile of the employees should change. In fact, if you haven't dived into generationally and maybe work with tech, or if you have UI, UX, and done a good avatar of the employee of your company, that would probably be good based on generation, and then be able to use that as a strategy for your leaders. But there's mixed reviews on that, which means organizations must walk a very fine line between that, creating opportunities. So this is why I said the stereotypes, you can't swing so much to the left, right? And maybe if you have all these things for young employees, and then everyone else is gonna be like, well, wait a minute. I know me as a millennial, I'm like, I used to be the youngest. What happened? I like that. I didn't want to be the youngest until someone else came after me. Then you missed it. But the company, you don't want to, have so many strategies for just next gen leaders. And then you miss strategies for those leaders that have the historical knowledge. That's why I said thinking strategically about this will be very, very key. So you don't find yourself at either end of that scale there. You find a good balance based on your organizational needs of now, next, and later. And again, the tie to academia is that partnership and how to do that. Because once you all shift organizations and companies, you need to partner back with academia and inform them of that shift and what that looks like so they can continue to build that foundation. So that's why you got to myth bust yourself. And some of the things that we need to myth bust, by generation, we have different skill sets, but similar workplace needs. But remember, the context, the way I look at that based on generational may be different, okay? So professional development opportunities, things like taking risks and challenges, freedom of career, life choices, seeking multiple career experiences. For a younger generation, that may mean job hop. For a baby boomer or Gen X, that may mean opportunities to job hop, but within the company that I'm at. Either way, it's still seeking multiple career experiences. That's why I said that's sometimes what we miss in this overall conversation about even the commonalities of what that means. Focus on mental health and wellness. It's not just a Gen Z thing. That's everyone in the workplace. We already felt these things. It's just that in our society, just helped to elevate what we thought about that. And then shifting in the what and where of work. That's all of them. What do I do? How does work look like? How does that adapt to how I can provide it? So things almost like a paradox, if you think about it, things that seem different but are really the same when you think about generationally. You just need to understand what that looks like. Are you talking about educational benefits, for example, for students that are going to school for the first time, in the same way for those that want continued education? It's in the nuances like that in which we could think about how we, go to market with our multi-gen strategies. But just like diversity, equity, all that, multi-generational is now. This to me reminds me, so multi-generational is like, it's the diversity. Think about it. It's the diversity piece. And then intergenerational is the inclusion. We are going to be multi-gen, whether we like it or not. So we need to think about strategies in a different way. And how do we equip our leaders now with those leaders that are in earlier generation and have that historical knowledge and they've seen the shift? How do you strategize now? Because intergenerational is really what I want to take you all on in these few minutes that I'm with you this afternoon, because that's how you have, or how you create and foster environments where all generations feel appreciated, that they can do their best work, that someone like me can succeed. So I went through the conversation of generational so you can get to the point of intergenerational, from diversity to inclusion. There's a difference in that. So that's the first piece. And then, I've been talking a lot about this, the pivotal moments versus the stereotypes. Myth bust yourself. What stereotypes do you have? I remember me kind of progressing in my career as millennial, and I did not understand why leaders did not understand I need a break. And, if you don't get me at 4:50, I'm going to talk to you Monday. Like, that's what it needs to go. But, there's different stereotypes and things I had to learn. And I will tell you, at least me personally, learned the most when I sought out my own mentors that were in different generations. So purposefully seeking mentorship strategically so I could learn and grow. And you really usually find a good tie between millennials and baby boomers in the workplace, and usually Gen X and Gen Z, but it depends. But do your mentorship programs even allow for the breaking of stereotypes and the myth busting? Because most all generations, especially as we continue to move forward, you'll see the similarities come about. Working conditions, requirements, cultural changes, all those sort of things. So think pivotal moments as you think about intergenerational as we move forward. So continuing to myth busting as we think about post-COVID. A few more stats for you. Again, I said I'm breaking every rule. So if you didn't hear me say that, I'm breaking every PowerPoint rule, okay? Don't tell me that I didn't warn you, because I want you to have all this stuff. So 96% of millennials believe boomers in the workplace are a great source of membership, busting some stereotypes. It usually reminds them of that grandparents, grandmother, grandfather like relationship, and that's where you see it's super close. Okay, so that sort of mentorship. Do our mentorship programs go to that level deep, or do we just say find a mentor? These are the sort of things I want you to think about strategically. And also 90% of boomers agree that millennials bring new skills and ideas. They know this. Okay, they know this. They know there's some things to learn and some things to share. Now, based on stereotypes and their involvement with each other, I think that's where that goes in the way, but that's not a generational thing. That's the emotion more tied to the generation. But it's a whole nother topic, right? EQ, EI, and generations. But but today, myth busting some things, you actually see that these leaders in different generations, they want to work together. So it's our role in helping in the understanding how they can do that. All right. And then 85% of executives agreed or strongly agreed that diversity is critical. That also means diversity in gender. Very, very critical. So now that we know that, again, what do you do? What do you do moving forward? Okay, so here's some things that I think you can do. So here's 7 tips on building bridges and the ways to stop burning them. So it's gonna be the opposite. This is a list of building them. And if you don't want to burn them, don't do the opposite, okay? So realistic multi-generational training in the workplace. And I've purposely made capital training and workplace because we have high-level training. I would encourage you to take a look at what type of training you all do. A good way to even partner with academia on this so they can talk about the history and mysteries of the workplace. But realistic, what does that mean? How do we work together? Because it's going to happen anyway. How do you, share, and do we have training for that individual contributor that is Gen Z that has gotten a promotion and now they're the leader of their peers? What does that look like? Intergenerational things. But the training in the workplace is going to be very key. So how you start to ease into that will be dependent on your organization. And then teaching and encouraging retro-engineered learning, which I love, more of that scenario based. But when you hire someone, have them work in a multi-generational or train with someone in another generation, and more share what are the lessons learned. So to me, it's more personal because as I continue to grow in my career, I sought out executives and leaders and said, this is what I'm dealing with. How have you dealt with this in the past? And let's have learning that way versus me telling you, let me learn, and then let's have some open dialogue. So retro-engineered learning in a different way will help foster and bring that out. And then active learning, always learning every point. Using generational data as a guideline for strategy, not for stereotypes, but for strategy. How you burn a bridge if you use it for not strategy, for just stereotypes. So using that generational data in a different way, how do you use it? How do you infuse that in the organization? Like I used to partner heavily with marketing because they do a lot of this research for product-based and customer-based and all those sort of things. And I started taking that and using that data to think about it from a recruitment standpoint, because there were some really gems and gold to pull out from that. And then I said, teach the whole person approach to multi-generational workforce. So that means the whole leader, right? Let's not make any stereotypes. Let's teach the art of the oneness. Let's get to know each other, what makes them great, what makes them tick, because everyone has things in the workplace that makes them great, no matter what their role is, and then elevate from that. So that's really fostering that coaching more mentality. And then I have a few other things for you, leveraging focus groups. You want the answer, pull them together. As a leader, anytime I'd roll out anything, I would purposely try to have a focus group that was multi-generational, multiple abilities, and diverse in nature, and then have those discussions about what we wanted to do to move a company forward, or what initiative or strategy or anything that we wanted to do. So that may help you. And I talked about like a generational avatar a little earlier, and then developing a deeper bench. So usually from a performance management standpoint, we have like next in line, but do we have development on what that means based on like even what I shared with you, that mentorship? What does that mean? You might have put them with the leader that's been with the company for a while, but why? What is the why in that? What's the learnings? And really more the point of having a bench of next in line leaders is to figure out how do we close skill gaps that they will need when they become those future leaders. So a different maybe perspective of looking at it. And then leveraging intergenerational strengths. We know there is an impact to the business. It just makes good business sense when our workforces are multi-generational, but when we leverage them strategically, that's when there's the impact to the business. That's why I said that movement between multi-gen, which is like diversity, it's going to happen anyway, to intergenerational, which means the inclusion piece of it. And that's where we foster more of the innovation. So maybe just try it one day. Okay, so here's something for you to look at. Won't spend too much time here, but the last couple slides is talking about shifting to intergenerational and pulling out the value and how do we work together and how do you leverage this in a different way. So I just put by generation, here are some of the ways we can leverage different generations in a different way. So baby boomers love advancement through hard working, long-term tenure. Gen Z likes that too. They want stability. Look at all the stuff they're seeing and experiencing. Job security, but everyone wants that in some way. But so I just put some tips on here about how you start to build bridges. Well, you understand this. And then strategically, what does that look like in your organization? How can you match these leaders, or how can you bring them all to the table for innovation discussions or anything like that? So just some tips for you to take a look at. And then, so what does this mean for your workplace? So we talked about history. History is, I guess, a little bit of myth busting in there, and then starting to do a little perspective shifting into an intergenerational concept that you may or may not have heard of before. That's the journey that we're on. So this is what happens when you dive into this for your organization. You would see more similarities and differences, and then that would shift your mind to that. But what does that mean for in the workplace in my last, I guess, couple minutes here with you? It's been so fun with you all. 110 strong, I see. Okay, so 4 big takeaways, and I put the quotes on there for you because I want you to have this, but here's what you can do. What does this mean in the workplace? What do you do with what I shared with you, this information? Creating, fostering, I think you can do now is starting to foster environments that create trust. That's where we start. Trust, teamwork, communication, and openness, and shift to not how do we manage a multi-generational workforce, but how do we unlock the potential of what this does to our organization when we do so. So starting to shift that perspective and that mindset, because we know, again, like I said, there's an impact to the business when we are able to do that effectively. And then the other part is just like all the other different generations, varying skill sets. So knowing that there's different inspirations, really that's where that comes from. Not a stereotype, but different inspirations and priorities that push them inside and outside of work. How do you foster those environments are going to be very, very key for you. And then there's large companies that are starting to try to tackle these sort of things. Like I said, with the boomerangs, those that want to come back into the workplace, things like returnships and all of that good stuff. So don't be afraid to be creative and inventive in this way. I know we're in the workplace, we're trying to figure out how to attract talent in different ways. And this is where that innovation can come from. In fact, now starting to look at some of these companies, it was like some of them said like Gen Z in their workplace was like, that'd be great. Like we have internships, maybe there's a returnship, and they just kind of fostered. That's the power of having these focus groups together in that way. And then, this stat at the bottom about Randstad, 83% said companies are able to come up with innovative ideas and solution because of the fact of being in a multi-generational workplace. But what do you do with that? That's still just scratching the surface. So those are some of my takeaways for you. And then I'll go into as tips for building. To me, tips go into 2 things. And then I'll see if I have time for questions here as I end. But building bridges, how can you help? 2 things. Understand readiness gap for your company or institution and the leader readiness gap. So to me, it's business readiness, leader readiness. That's what you need to uncover in your strategy discussions. Because sometimes we're like, yes, multi-generational workforce, let's go. Let's have these different strategies and let's think about these things. But what's the gap that we need to close in our own leaders, in our own business strategies for this to be as effective, or it may not be as effective as you would like. So business readiness is the top. So I talked about, 70% of organizations say we know multi-generational workforce, we know it's important for their success, but that's where I said earlier, but only 10 say they're ready to address this. Find out what are we not ready to address, and some of these bullet points at the bottom will help you be able to do so. Do you consider a multi-generational workforce to be an asset or a liability? Let's start there in senior leadership conversations. Let's address the elephant in the room and then move forward from there. So know the composition of your workforce. What does that mean? Assume nothing, don't become a victim of generalizations, and then encourage different generations to learn about each other. And then how do we tell the story of that? That's going to be key. And then the leader readiness gap is about, about the stat there that you see. It's kind of a little hidden there at the bottom, but what winning combinations can you have between the generations to help foster that innovation? There's a stat about 6% of survey respondents on this same Randstad survey said they didn't feel like only 6% of leaders were equipped to lead a multi-generational workforce. So that lets us know there's some work to do there in that space. What does that mean for your organization? That's what I would encourage you to do. All right, so 8 mega trends on here that you can take a look at later is, I shared this. Gartner predicts by 2025, 2 million new jobs will be created. We're in the process of that, but about over half of them do not even exist. So what do we do with that? Partnerships with academia, right? Because the answer is to keep prioritizing new skills and what does that look like? That's where we can come together in different ways. Again, not just job fairs or things like that. Let's come together as strategy partners moving forward. And in intergenerational focus, I talked about that, upskill, reskill, cross-skill, all that good stuff. The future is personalization. That's why, in order to have innovation and intergenerational, you have to understand generations, and then you can start doing more personalization versus, or not versus, but based on the person. And in work life, there's trends about it'll be a series of sprints, even for those in different generations. I think Gen Z is shaking it up for all of us of that mindset. And what you'll start seeing is expert generalists and hyper specialists in their field. So you'll still have that. AI is going to create opportunities. And then peer-to-peer learning. And I have a few things about targeted workforce strategies that I've been talking about throughout. And how you can do that for those that are coming back to the workplace, letting people do their best work, and then understanding. Does that make sense so far? All right. This is my voice for y'all. Okay. Strategy. Let me end off on this because this is actually how I began for you, and then I'll stop talking. So I began off saying, here's what the goal of what I want you to leave away from, or leave away with me is, how do you start to be strategic in a different way? First, you got to look within, see what your organization looks like, and then make strategies based on that. That's really going to be the key as we continue to move forward. So I encourage you to take this and go be strategic. Go be strategic in a different way. Let's start to move from multi-generational workforce to intergenerational workforce, and really challenge ourselves and our leaders to think about this data and these things in a different way. Not things that put us in a box, but really things that help us uncover the box, think outside the box, really shifting our mindset. I think that's all what generations want, which is why when you have this conversation and we sometimes don't like this topic because it puts us in the box, it's really not designed to do that. So with that, that's all I have. I'll turn it back. You said 2-3 minutes. I think I gave you some.
Thank you, LaTasha. That was amazing. We have a wealth of questions. We don't have time to go through all of the questions, but I think that it's actually a really good way to move into part 2. I wouldn't have wanted LaTasha to take away from any of the information that she provided us today for us to go into the Q&A. So quick plug for educational equity. Join us again next month where we'll have a panel representing some of these generations that LaTasha has mentioned today. And we will have them actually address some of the questions that you all presented in the chat and in the Q&A. So your questions will be answered, but you'll have to join us next month to get them answered. LaTasha, thank you so much for the time and the energy that you provided us with today. It's really funny. Fun fact, I did I won't say which generation I identify with, but I did a survey, Saray and I did some time ago, and we both actually, our results showed that we were traditionalists, which neither of us are. Obvious, that part is obvious. So it's really funny how kind of the different generations and the work ethic and your family values and all of that kind of feed into how you show up in the workplace. I actually learned a lot today. I'm going to go back and review the recording because I was kind of trying to take some notes, and it was moving fast, but LaTasha, thank you for all of the information that you
No
provided.
problem.
We are extremely grateful. For everyone else, thank you for taking the time out of your day. I hope that I have rambled enough so that you could scan the QR code and you'll join us next month. We will also provide, when we send out the recording, information on connecting with LaTasha. And if LaTasha agrees, we will also provide you with a copy of her slides so that you will have this information if you were scrambling to make notes like I was. So thank you all. Have a wonderful afternoon, and we'll see you next month.